Hey guys, Tyler here. I'm back with another monthly update. For most of you, this may be the first time you heard my voice. I figured that in order to get more attention on my game, I would have to put actual effort into my videos, instead of just recording some gameplay and calling it a day. I have been on that grind for the past few days, so I have a lot to showcase. If you wish to see more information, there's a link to the devlog in the description. Alright, let's get right down to business. Pathfinding has always been a particular subject to me. Like we all heard of the decades-old joke slash problem of NPCs having terrible pathfinding. The implementation of pathfinding is something I feel very few people think about anymore. For a while, I knew that pathfinding would be something I would have to implement at some point. I do have some knowledge on how to do it and how it works, though. What you see in the background is an old pathfinding project I made before I even thought about making Project Lorenzo. I figured pathfinding is one of those things I have to learn before working on any sort of major project. That's why I made it. While I consider this project to be a great achievement, there is one problem I feel would come up if I try to implement this system into my game. The system works by checking tiles on the grid. There's too many tiles in my game's map. The size of each chunk is 16 by 16 tiles, which adds up to 256 tiles per chunk. The map consists of 100 chunks that would make for a grand total of 25,600 chunks. Do you see the problem here? Even when taking into account that not every tile on the map will be walkable, doing it this way still has the potential to cause massive slowdown, so I had to think of another way. And that's when I had the idea. Games made in the Source engine like Half-Life 1 and 2 use something called AI nodes. They are typically used by NPCs to navigate the level. Unfortunately, I don't really know how the Source engine functions at its core. However, with the programming knowledge I've gained over the years and the I my experience of using the engine's map editor, I was able to get a general idea on how it would work just by looking at it. So I added AI nodes around the map for enemies and familiars to use. I managed to do this by using the Objects feature in the tiled map editor. Before I never bothered using it, and just settled on using special tiles to set the spawn points of entities. As I'm confident that using the feature could work, I may use it a lot more in the future. Not gonna lie, I'm proud of myself for figuring this out and getting it to actually work. You can see how each AI node is connected to each other, but it's about time I show you the new enemy I added to the game to specifically test the pathfinding system. The Wraith enemy is created for the purpose of testing the pathfinding system. The enemy's behavior is quite simple. They will shoot projectiles at the player. The player goes out of their field of vision. They will pathfind to the player's last known location to try to find them again. With this behavior, it would be difficult to escape this enemy once they got you in their sights. Well, at least without sprinting behind cover or something. The Wraith is a lot more dangerous when fighting with other enemies, so it's often best to just isolate them first before killing them, or just avoid them altogether. Violence isn't always necessary. Moving away from the previous topic, I've also implemented another core feature to the game. Of course, along with everything else I've implemented, I took a lot of time debugging it and making sure it's working the way I wanted it to. Even then, there are bugs that I will have to fix after I finish editing this video. Without further ado, I introduce you, Familiars. Familiars is one of those things I've been waiting to add to the game, along with sub-weapons. I think it was around 3 days after I began working on the game when I got the idea. I was watching a review on Castlevania Symphony of the Night when it happened, so mechanic is inspired by that game. The mechanic has gone through several iterations throughout the course of development. I remember that I was having trouble deciding how many familiars the player should have at once before just settling on one. Even then, how familiars will operate may change down the line. You may be wondering why I decided to add familiars in the first place. I've noticed that in most single-player games outside of JRPGs, the player always has to go it alone most of the time. I also like the charm of AI-controlled party members helping you out. There is another reason that's related to the tone of the game itself. In Project Lorenzo, you are just a human with no supernatural or magical capabilities of any kind. Even with sub-weapons, your options in terms of combat are still limited. You only have so much morale, and no matter how much you try to deny it, the will can never surpass the flesh. Familiars are magical by nature, while the player and the sub-weapons are more grounded. They act as a way for the player to achieve feats that they wouldn't be able to achieve by themselves. Now, let's talk about how you can gain familiars. Every time you start a new game, there is a chance that these sigils will spawn at set locations around the map. The chances varies depending on the area, with the streets area having the lowest chance. Familiars are usually something you'll gain access to during the mid to end game of your current run. Sigils will assign a familiar to you when interacted with. Like Crate, what familiar you'll contract with also depends on what area you're in, and what familiars you already contracted with in your current game. As of now, there's only one familiar in the game, and it's pretty much a copy of the Wraith enemy. In normal circumstances, most familiars will just follow the player around. They may use special behavior depending on the player's actions and current situation. What they will do in such a scenario solely depends on the familiar themselves. For instance, when the player enters combat, the Wraith familiar will target a random enemy that's participating in the battle and shoot projectiles at them. The familiar is also protective. If an enemy that the familiar isn't targeting inflicts damage to the player, it will immediately switch targets to the assailant. Please note that familiars aren't invincible, as they also have their own health pool. Enemies can target familiars as well. This means that, unlike the player, familiars are more vulnerable to taking damage, as they are not fully controllable. When a familiar dies, they will disappear and become completely unusable. You can heal them at the cost of some of your morale, which will vary depending on how much health the familiar is missing. In order to revive a dead familiar, you must have enough morale to fully heal them. At the cost of some of their health, the player can order their familiar to use a special ability. This ability is different for every familiar, but in the case of the Wraith familiar, they will be teleported to the player's location. This is useful for saving the familiar from unavoidable damage, or for putting them into a better position. So yeah, I think that's all I have to show for now. This is the first scripted video I ever made, so I hope it will get more traction, as the script took 3 days to write. Next, I'll fix some issues with my game, then I'll finally begin work on objectives and the win condition. So I'll see you guys next month, I guess.